Middle-earth, home to many diverse races, from wizards to hobbits, goblins to dwarves, orcs to elves. Many stories have been created and developed in the world of Tolkien. To delve into the world, you can start here with Dagora TV.
Thingol was born in the days before the sun and the moon, when Middle-earth was only lit by starlight. After the chaining of Melkor, the Valar Orome took 3 elves, Ingwe, Finwë and Elwë, to Valinor to convince the elves to join the Valar in the Blessed Realm. Upon their return, the elven ambassadors convinced many to join them on the great journey to the west. During the 1,000-mile journey, the elven host separated into 3 groups, the Vanyar, the Noldor, and the Teleri. The Teleri, led by Elwë and his brother Olwë, were the largest and the slowest group, and were the last to reach the western shores of Middle-earth. The Noldorin elves had already left for Valinor, and the Teleri were forced to wait for a time in Middle-earth. During this time, Elwë wandered into the forest of Nan Elmoth, where he met and fell in love with Melian the Mayor. Caught in an enchantment of their own making, Elwë and Melian could not be found by the searching Teleri. When the Valar returned to take the remaining elves to Valinor, only some of them followed Elwë across the Great Sea. The rest had come to love the lands of Beleriand and refused to leave without their missing lord. Over 200 years passed before Elwë appeared again with his bride Melian. He gathered his people together and founded the kingdom of Doriath. His subjects would become the Sindar, or the Grey Elves, and their language was Sindarin. From then on, Elwë was known as King Aelu Thingol, and he claimed lordships of all the lands in Beleriand. While Thingol was king of the Grey Elves, who never saw the light of the 2 trees, as an ambassador of the Valar, he was counted as a high elf, and equal to any lord of the Eldar. On Melian's advice, Thingol became an ally of the dwarves of Belegost, and carved the caverns of Menegroth for him. In a payment he gave them, along with many other things, the great pearl Nymphelos. 1,000 years before the first rising of the sun and the moon, the Green Elves entered Beleriand under Denethor. Thingol welcomed them, and gave them the lands of Osiriand, which they named Lindon. The Green Elves told of the spread of the orcs and other foul creatures in the north and east of Middle-earth. The Grey Elves began arming themselves. Centuries later, Melkor returned to Middle-earth. Now named Morgoth, he had destroyed the 2 trees, killed Finwë, the king of the Noldor, and stolen the fabled Silmarils. Seeking to claim dominion quickly, he launched a sudden assault on the lands of the Sindar. The first battle of Beleriand went well for Thingol. He prevented the orcs from invading Doriath, but the Green Elves took horrific losses under the Falathrim, were besieged. The Falathrim were finally saved by the unexpected arrival of the Noldor, who launched the Dagor Nuin Gileath, the Battle Under the Stars, in which the Morgoth's forces were all but annihilated. After the first battle of Beleriand, Doriath was encircled by the girdle of Melian, an impenetrable fence of enchantment that guarded the kingdom. While his own kingdom was protected, Thingol was still loath to surrender any of the lands in Beleriand to the Noldor, as he was suspicious of the aggressive new lords in Middle-earth. In Hithlum, the Noldor had to leave to dwell, and in the highlands of Dorthonion, and in the lands of the east of Doriath, they are empty and wild. For I am the Lord of Beleriand, and all who seek to dwell there shall hear my word, the Silmarillion, of the return of the Noldor. King Thingol's relations with the Noldor were strained, and grew worse decades later when he learned the truth of the Kingslaying of Aquilonde. Thingol banned the use of Quenya in his lands, which led to Sindarin being the common elven tongue in Middle-earth. The king of Doriath refused to aid the Noldor in a war against Morgoth, and took little part in the ongoing struggle. Thingol and Melian had one child, a daughter named Luthien, said to be the fairest woman ever to live. Luthien fell in love with a man named Beren. Thingol did not wish for the two to wed, as he valued his daughter very highly and disliked men. As a bride price, he asked for a Silmaril from the crown of Morgoth, thinking there was no way that Beren could fulfill his demand. However, when Beren and Luthien came back from Angband, and when Beren showed him his missing hand, which still had held the Silmaril in the belly of Karcheroth, he softened his heart towards him. Soon though, Karcheroth, in the anguish of rage from the Silmaril that burned in his insides, broke from the girdle of Melian and entered Doriath. In that hour, Thingol, along with Beren, Mablung, Beleg, and Huan, the Hound of Valinor, began the hunt of the wolf. Karcheroth was finally slain by Huan, but both Huan and Beren died in the process. After that, Luthien died also, and coming to the halls of Mandos, she begged Mandos that Beren to be returned to life. However, it was beyond power of Mandos and withhold the souls of men from going beyond the circles of the world. Therefore, Iluvatar, through Manwë, offered her and Beren to live again, but with Luthien shared the gift of men. She agreed, and they both came back to life, and lived the remainder of their lives in Tol Galen, far from the sight of any of the mortals. Thingol adopted as a son a young man named Turin, son of Hurin, and akin to Beren himself, who was sent to Doriath when he was 7 years old. When he grew up, he was permitted to join Beleg Cuthalion on the marches of Doriath, fighting the orcs of Morgoth. Turin accidentally caused the death of Seiros, one of Thingol's councillors, who had provoked and attacked him. Before he could get either punished or forgiven, he fled. Thingol, however, gave Beleg a leave to seek out his friend, who in the meantime had joined a band of outlaws. Telling to Thingol that Turin did not wish to return, Thingol allowed Beleg to go out and join his friend and give him the black sword Anglakel that Eorl had forged and given to Thingol in tribute. Sometime after Turin's tragic death, Hurin, Turin's father, and now an old man, was allowed to enter Menegroth with a band of outlaws, where in anger he threw the Narglemyr, the treasure of Nargothrond, before King Thranduil, and thanked him for aiding his son. This infuriated the outlaws, who tried to take the gold back but were killed by Thingol's guards. Melian finally pierced through Urin's madness and grief. Shamed by his actions, he left Menegroth a broken man. At that time, a desire came into Thingol's heart to take the Narglemyr and place the Silmaril in it, thus melding together two of the greatest creations made by elves and dwarves. He hired some dwarven craftsmen to do it for him. But by the time the dwarves were finished, they had become obsessed with the Narglemyr and asked for it as a payment for their labour. This infuriated Thingol, who had also grown obsessed with the jewellery and refused to give it as a payment. Realising they were converting the Silmaril, the dwarves were angered by these harsh words and killed him. This led to the sacking of Menegroth and eventual destruction of Doriath, which scattered its people.